Howdy, I'm John Richmond, and I'm the inventor of the GOLDROP, gold and pay dirt separating processor. What I'm about to show you is my interpretation of a setup using two 5-gallon buckets as your tailings bucket and your pump bucket. This is the siphon tube between buckets. After you've filled this tailings bucket with water, place the siphon tube into the water and force it down to the bottom and allow the tube to fill with water until it comes out the top of the tube here. Now place the plunger, the plug, into the end of the tube and push into it. That way you're trapping the water into the tube so that as you extract the tube, the water stays in the tube, and then you bring it over to the pump bucket. Now you can release the plug and the water will drain out from the tailings bucket to the pump bucket as gravity forces the water into the greater quantity of water into the lesser quantity of water, and we'll try to keep these two buckets equal at all times. So now we'll go ahead and put a cement block in this bucket here. It serves two purposes. This way it traps the siphon tube about halfway up the height of the bucket. That way you're not drawing solid material from the tailings bucket to the pump bucket. And then also add a couple of bricks to the pump bucket too. This allows the siphon pipe to stay off the bottom There we have the setup for operating the siphon system. This is the mounting clamp for the GOLDROP onto the bucket. So we'll hang this on the edge of the bucket. And secure the thumb screws into the inside of the bucket to hold the GOLDROP in place. Go ahead and give it some good snugs. This is your tailings basket, and that sits into the tailings bucket. It sits on top of that brick there. It's supported there. And now you can add the downspout to the discharge of the GOLDROP, which leads into that basket. This is where your tailings will collect, so that you will be emptying the tailings bucket by sliding this to the side, directing the flow of water off into the bucket so that you can remove the basket and then dump your tailings. Place the pump into the pump bucket and allow it to sit on top of that brick there. Just kind of position it so that it's not sucking off the bottom, is what you're trying to achieve. This is the 12-volt battery and trickle charger that keeps the battery fully charged, that runs the bilge pump, which is a 12-volt 36-watt bilge pump, 1100 gallons per hour. Now I'll hook up the battery and start the process. So first off, we'll take our valves here and make sure all the water is flowing. It's filling up now. I have water coming out the tailings there. So that's this water here. We will open up the valve and allow the air to escape the jar, get all the air out of it. This valve remains open at all times. The only time you close it is when you're actually changing the jar. So okay, that valve works. This valve here is the drop water, is connected to the meter, so it's adjustable up and down from off all the way up beyond a gallon a minute, because that's what the pump is pumping out. So that valve works. So we blew the air out of that one. That one is working. The second mixing valve here. That one's working just fine. And we'll also turn on the funnel feed water here. And that one also is working fine. So everything works. We're ready to process. Now we'll make up some pay dirt here. I have 5 grams of gold that I've selected out of what I have that we'll be adding to this dirt here. And now here's our pay dirt. So now we'll classify this dirt, 3 different classifications to run through the GOLDROP. This is the 3 different classifications of the pay dirt. This material here is the 1/8 inch material, and here we have the 2 millimeter material, and this material here is the 1/2 millimeter material. So what I'll do to make this a little more interesting is I have this hematite black sand here that I'm going to make this a little more difficult, and you can see there's a magnet and it sticks to it pretty good. So we'll add this to make this extraction a little more challenging. Okay, now we'll process this pay dirt through the GOLDROP. Now I'll show you the various parts of the GOLDROP and what they do. Right here in the top of the funnel, we have this valve here, which controls this water flow in the funnel. This helps fluidize the dirt and erodes it down into the funnel, into the trap. This valve here controls the vertical flow of the water up into the trap, suspending the dirt in the trap and allowing the gold to drop out. This is the drop water valve off to the side here. Now this valve here is connected to the water meter. The water meter gives you a visual gauge to understand where to set the water. From 0.1 gallons up to 1 gallon a minute, and then of course beyond when it goes beyond. So this is how you set the drop water, which is controlling the elutriation into the trap. This valve in front here is a mixing valve. It flows water into the trap as you open it to cause a disturbance and keeps the pay dirt in constant motion in the trap. And this is a variable control, and you set this by watching the dirt in the trap be disturbed. This other valve on the side here is an additional mixing valve entering the trap that allows for, if you have really big material that you need more water flow to get it to disturb, this will allow it to happen. Or if you're just blowing out the trap and get rid of the material into the tailings bucket, you open that too, and that additional water assists the evacuation of the material that's in the trap. You can see there's the feed tube, so that all the dirt drops into the trap coming down the feed tube. So that's the basic operation. This valve here is the gate valve that leads to the collection jar. See if I can get a little straighter view of that. So it remains open during all processing and is only closed when you are actually emptying the jar. So that's kind of a up close and personal view of the different components of the GOLDROP. We'll start processing with the 1/8 inch material to see what big gold we can get out. Now the bigger material requires more water flow. This is why I classify and separate out the smaller material from the bigger material so it doesn't get blown out into the tailings. So we start with the bigger material and see if we can get our gold out. We'll first introduce a little bit of the gravel into the GOLDROP so we can set the mixed water. Let's get a little more in there than that. Should fill up the trap a little more than that. There we go. That gives us an idea of what to do. So now that the material is just sitting there, now you want to open up this bottom mixing valve and start creating the disturbance in the trap. Get that material moving. Oh, not quite so much. There we go. That's probably plenty good. So now you can see the material in the trap kind of being tossed around and fluidized. So that then allows the gold to work its way through the gravel and drop out. So now that we got that set, now let's set the drop water. It's currently set about 0.5, so now I'm going to bring it down and allow some of these the rocks to come down in the drop tube. That looks about right. We'll just let them dangle there. Okay, now we'll go ahead and feed in the rest of the dirt and see what happens. Okay, so the pan is empty now. All of that 1/8 inch material is in the trap. Getting tossed about. As you can see, there really wasn't much of that 1/8 inch material. There we go. So it's just kind of being tossed around in there, and it's going to stay there because there's not enough water flow to cause the gravel to leave. And as you can see, the rest of the column is basically empty There's nothing being goosed up vertically and into the tailings bucket. So the tailings bucket is absolutely clean. There's nothing coming out because it's all still in the trap column being tossed about. So now we'll check the jar and see if the gold dropped out. Now it's time. We'll remove the jar and see what gold is in it. First off, you're going to increase the drop water in order to get these pebbles back up into the trap so nothing falls out of the trap. And now there's nothing coming down into the drop tube, we'll go ahead and close the valve and remove the jar and see what gold is in the jar. It should be the big pieces, along with some bigger mineral too. But the mineral, pretty easy to separate out. Well, you can see there's the gold, there's the big pieces of gold. Let's get these back up here and roll that gravel back down there. Well, as you can see, there's our big pieces of gold there. And like I say, some minerals too, but they become pickers. So they're easy to deal with. If you see some mineral in the jar, you're basically going to see gold there too, if the gold is there. So now we'll go ahead and we'll process the next classification, which is our 2mm, and see what smaller gold we get out of that. In order to prepare for our next run, we need to empty the trap of all the material that's in there. So since we have the jar off and we found our gold, now all you need to do is just open the valve and dump the contents into the basket there. And now we're empty, and what we can do now is fill the jar with water and screw it back on, prepare for our next run. Now we can start the water back up and just allow the air to bubble out. And now we're ready. Now we'll set it for the plus 2mm material. So we'll go ahead and wash a little bit in so we can set the mixing valve. Yeah, that's probably enough to get it going. So now that the dirt's just sitting there, now we'll go ahead and adjust the valve to get everything moving. There we go. Now we have a movement in the trap. Let's slow it down a little bit. We don't need to have so much water moving. As long as we have a movement of the material down to the aperture of the drop, we're fine. Now we'll set the drop water. We'll bring it down from 0.5. Allow some of the dirt to drop into. There we go. Move it up a little bit so Okay, well that's a pretty good dangle there. Now we'll go ahead and start introducing our material. Start washing it in now. Okay, well that's all washed in there. Well, you can see, I'm not sure if you saw any gold drop in, but here's the action inside the trap. You can see all the material is stuck in the trap, and well, it doesn't go any higher than that, but you can see it's all just being lazily tossed about inside and fluidized, so that the gold just works its way down to this point of aperture here and then drops out into the jar, as all of this dirt is just constantly moving around in constant movement. The gold doesn't stand a chance. So you can see all of this dirt is still in the column. It's not leaving. It's just continuously being washed. This is why it's so important to use as little as water as possible, so you're not blowing out any of the tailings or the gold into the tailings. So all this material is being goosed vertically by adding more material. The water is just there to keep it all fluidized. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up and see what dropped into the jar. Now we'll remove the jar and see what we got. So again, we'll turn up the drop water, keep the dirt up in the trap. That way it prevents it from getting into the valve. Close the valve. And let's remove the jar. Well, there's all the smaller gold. See if I can just kind of, if I had it, well, it's in there. Let me get this down to the corner, see if I can roll away some of the well, you can see there's the gold. And there's the mineral that dropped out with it. But you just don't mind the mineral because it's so doggone big, it's easy to separate it. So there's more of our gold recovered there. So now we'll go ahead and process the last material, which is 1/2 millimeter, and see what small gold drops out. So again, now the procedure, in order to empty the gold drop, you're just going to open the valve, allow all that material to drain out into the basket, and then turn off your water. Now we can put the jar back on. Open the valve, well, the valve is open, and just go ahead and turn on the water and just allow it to fill back up. Draining all the air out. Now we're set for our next run. Now we'll go ahead and set up for our final classification, 1/2 millimeter. Go ahead and dump in a little bit of this brown dirt anyway. And now we'll set the mix. Oops. And create a disturbance. Okay, we got a disturbance going there. Now we'll turn down the drop and allow some of the dirt to come down into the trap or into the drop tube. Some of the bigger stuff that's in here, let it drop into the jar. Okay, we're set down that's about 0.15 gallons per minute flow. So we'll allow that to percolate and see what gold we get out of this. With the black sand in it. Hematite. Okay, this can is empty. Now we'll just let that percolate for a little bit and see what gold we got. And again, you can see in the column all of this dirt just kind of floating around inside. Not really leaving anything. But it's black and it's brown and it's just being tossed all around. Pretty interesting, up and down and all around. So anyway, that's the secret to the elutriation right here. And then the fact that the tiny water flows, really nothing is leaving the trap. It all just stays there and then slowly works its way out as you add more material to it. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and see what we got. Let's see what small gold we got in here. Then we'll turn up the water to keep the dirt up in the trap. Close the valve and unscrew the jar. Well, a little more cleanup will get that a little cleaner, but there's the gold. Where is it? There we go. There's the gold from the 1/2 millimeter 35 mesh pay dirt. Some pretty small stuff there. Okay, now we'll weigh it up and see what I got. This is the gold recovered out of the 1/8 inch material. Some pretty big stuff there. This is the gold that was recovered from the 2 millimeter material. And then this is what was recovered from the 1/2 millimeter 15 thousandths. Those bigger pieces there, I believe those were flushed out and trapped up in the elbow of the discharge. So I'm going to come up with a procedure for dumping that each time too. But that fell out when I flushed. So that's what that gold looks like. Pretty small stuff there too. Okay, now this gold here, we'll put some water in that. This gold here was recovered from the tailings. So that was my loss. So now I'll go ahead and dry all of this and weigh it up and see how much of a loss this was. Time to weigh in, see what we've recovered of my 5 grams. Okay, let's see. .8 grams is what I recovered out of 5 grams. That's a 4% loss. So let's add in now what I picked up in the tailings. 4.9 grams recovered out of 5. Well, that's a 98% recovery and a 2% loss. That is pretty amazing. Well, there we have it. The GOLDROP. A 10-gallon, or actually about 7 gallons of water, and a fast recovery of my gold. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you've learned something from this. If you buy a GOLDROP, you can use it for, brushing up on how to operate it. So I really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much.